Hey there, welcome to another episode of Deeply Rooted. Thank you for joining us. I hope you can check us out on all of our platforms. You can find us on our YouTube channel and on Apple Podcasts. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and leave us a review if you'd like to. You can also find us on our website, deeplyrootedpodcast.com. You can check out the blog post, upcoming ministry schedule, and all the archived episodes. That'll take you right to our YouTube channel. And if you haven't done so already, go on over and join us on our Facebook group page. We've got plenty of stuff going on there. It's a great way to keep in touch with all things Deeply Rooted. So again, if you haven't done so, make sure you find us on the Facebook group page. Now, today's episode, really looking forward to this one. We mentioned this one a week or so ago and let everybody know this on the Facebook page, but we were going to start a Q&A session, and we asked you guys for some feedback and got some really good questions, and we're looking forward to covering these here in just a moment. So I want to introduce our guest. He's going to help us out on this episode, and he's going to be our answer guy. I'm going to be the question guy, so I'm going to take the easy route, and I'm going to make him do the hard stuff. But before we get started, I don't even know if he's aware, but we've got to congratulate him for the time being. So he's officially made the all-time Deeply Rooted most brought-in guest list, however you want to put that. So you're officially the most honored guest on Deeply Rooted. So we have Josh Tompkins with us now. So Josh, thanks, man, for being a part of another episode of Deeply Rooted.
Well, I'm glad to be here. I'm glad to be the long-time guest. And if you want to throw some sound effects in there of cheers and all that sort of thing, we'll do that too. And you can send me a cake later.
Yeah. And the crowd goes wild. That's what we'll say.
Yeah.
We're going to dive right in. I'm not going to throw the names out of these that sent the question in, and that's not because they didn't ask. I'm just not going to, put them on the spot for these questions. We're not trying to embarrass anybody. We're here to learn, and we're here to dig into the scriptures, and that's the whole point of it. So we'll just go through the list here. First question I have is actually referring to communion, and the question is, should we use grape juice or red wine, or wine, I guess, for communion, and how often should we take communion? So what would you say to that question?
I would say that there's really no command on it. If you look at church history, I'll answer the second one first. The church throughout history has, normally, early on, they took communion once every Sunday. I mean, it's once a week.
Right.
And then as they went on, it would be less and less. Some churches do it once a week now. Some churches do it once a quarter. I think that there's a balance to be had there. We do it once a month. But there's no command on that. It says do it often. So whatever often would mean for a church, that's up to them. I would say at least more than once a year, I think would be a good thing. That whatever you mean by often. And now with whether it be the wine or juice, we know, and you can get yourself in trouble. These questions are always apt to get somebody in trouble. That's how it goes. So I'll say this. We know that in the New Testament they use wine. Mm-hmm. What type of wine, we don't know. How much alcohol content was in the wine, we don't know.
Right.
But they did use wine. We know that for a fact. Historically, we've used wine. That's the church has always used wine. That's how we've done it. And then when we in America, we started using the juice, the Welch's juice. I mean, that's when it first started being introduced. And here's how I handle it. How do you balance that? And this is just an opinion on it from me because there's no biblical command on it. Use this type of juice or this type of wine. So the way that I've always handled it is if anybody in the church is going to have a problem with it, or if it takes away from or distracts them from what we're about to do, then we need to be able to take that away and calm all the issues.
Right.
And I believe that if we used wine, or if another church in America used wine, there would be somebody in the congregation that said, I'm against that. So now you're dividing the congregation.
Yeah.
And I believe if we use juice, there's not going to be anybody in there that says, I'm against juice. So it puts us all on a united front. It's one of those things where I'll take a back seat, we'll take a back seat so that we don't offend a weaker brother. So I personally, and we as a church, use the juice as a way to not distract from the main reason for why we're doing that, which is to remember what Christ did for us.
Right.
So we don't make a big deal out of things that are actually a small deal. So there's no command on it. I think this is something that you use wisdom and your own conscience on it. pastor has to lead on that? That's a very good question, and that's my answer.
I think the command is the Lord's Supper.
Yeah.
And I would probably argue that the rest is going to fall a little bit under Christian liberty. Because I would also piggyback on what you said there about offending weaker brothers. There's a strong chance that people in your congregation, some of these might be coming from an alcoholic background.
Yeah.
And they come at life with a little bit different understanding of that issue, just like somebody with a drug background or what have you. And so I'm with you. I think you have to be careful about offending people and hurting or maybe even borderline tempting somebody back into something that certainly would be sinful. So, yeah, I'm with you there. I think that's a good way of looking at it historically versus, where we're at now, and just making sure we have some compassion towards our brothers and sisters to understand there might be a better way of doing this without, harming somebody's reputation or witness or bringing them into some type of temptation. Yeah. So that's a good response there. Second one, pretty straightforward question. Can you explain what the scriptures refer to as the unpardonable sin?
Another good question. That's a common question.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of people that are scared that they've committed the unforgivable sin.
Mm-hmm.
I've had people approach me about that and say, "What if I have?" There's people throughout church history have wondered. The author of Pilgrim's Progress, John Bunyan, was afraid that he committed that sin.
Yeah.
So there's always that fear. We know that God, throughout His Word, is a God of forgiveness. That He loves to forgive. He's quick to forgive. And then there's that one passage that says, "But this one sin He will not forgive." So that may be one of the most important things that we can decide or discern, or what is that sin? What is the unpardonable, unforgivable sin? And in Matthew 12, as you read that, and I preached a sermon on this not too long ago, and he was talking to the Pharisees. So you apply it, and that's how you interpret Scripture.
Right.
Who's he talking to right there? Talking to the Pharisees, and he's warning them about crossing the line to the point of no return. That they've seen, they've heard, they know everything that he's done by the power of the Holy Spirit in his life. And really, there's nothing else that God could show them that he hasn't already shown them in Jesus. And then he casts out a demon in Matthew 12, and they look at him and say, "You're casting out demons in the name of Satan or Beelzebub." And at that point, they've seen as much as they can see, and Jesus says, "You're in danger of," here's how I define it, willingly, defiantly, and finally rejecting Christ.
Yeah. With
full knowledge, full understanding, and full light. So that's the line they were going to cross. And that's the warning that he's given them. That you don't need to do this. That you could step across the line to the point of no return. And then the question is, okay, the Pharisees were about to do this. Can we do this? And I think that Hebrews is 5 times in the book of Hebrews warns us about unbelievers doing this. Not believers, but unbelievers doing this.
Right.
That they could, with full light and full understanding and full knowledge, everything shown to them, and they could willingly, defiantly, and finally reject Christ and say, "No more. I'm done." And at that point, there's no more chance.
Yeah.
There's no more light. They become blind, they become deaf, they become hardened. That's what Hebrews says. There's a point of no return here. And there was a story told, and it's a scary story, because I think that's why he puts that in there. Jesus wants us to be almost scared, unbelievers to be scared that they would finally say no to Christ and there'd be no more chance.
Right.
And there's a story of a man named Aaron Burr. He was the 3rd vice president, grandson of Jonathan Edwards. He went to Princeton, and while he was on campus as a young man, there's a man come to preach revival services. And at that revival, he was convicted. He heard the truth, heard the gospel. There was tears. People were getting saved. And the story goes that he said, "Oh God, leave me alone, and I'll leave you alone." And years later, another preacher came and asked him about the gospel. And he told him, he said, from that day on at that revival service, I never had another desire to be a Christian. And he crossed that line. That is, you say, well, where's the line? I don't know. But every unbeliever needs to be incredibly careful that when they see the full light, full revelation, Holy Spirit conviction, see it, hear it, know it, understand it, and then they say no. There is a point where God says, okay, no more chance.
Right.
And I believe that's what that sin is.
All right, the next question shifts a little bit here, and we're going to sort of navigate into the social, cultural aspect of things, particularly in America, really. This is a hot-button topic from time to time. Certainly, we've kind of gotten away from with what's been going on in the world now. But what do you think, here's the question, would be a proper Christian worldview of the issue of marijuana?
I've just recently got this one, too.
Okay.
So I'm coming in a little bit prepared. These are common questions, and these are good questions. I don't know who asked these questions, but this is a good one, especially in our day when I think it's legal in Virginia now. I don't know the full, I don't have a full understanding of it. So I was asked, what do we do? Can we grow it? Can we take it? And here's my take on it. It's a mind-altering drug.
Right.
And it is guaranteed to alter your mind to the point of drunkenness. I mean, that's what it is. And we know the Bible is very, very clear on drunkenness, that we need to be sober-minded, filled with the Spirit, not filled with wine. So I would tell people, if that's why you're taking it, I know there's other uses of it, whether it be for pain or glaucoma or appetite or cancer patients. I get that. Doctor prescribes marijuana. But if you're taking it just for the high and for your mind to be altered, I believe it's like being drunk, and the Bible's very clear on drunkenness.
Yeah, I think Jesus is pretty clear when he says that we're to love the Lord our God with all of our heart, soul, mind, and strength. And I would just kind of, again, back you up there. It's really hard to love God with all your mind when it's altered.
Yeah.
And I think that would probably definitely fall in that category there. So, yeah, a good word of wisdom there. All right, number 4, sort of a two-part question here. First part, when is a pastor truly disqualified according to biblical standard? And then secondly, if they are, can they be restored to ministry?
There's a balance we got to come at with this one, which I think is hard, that we don't... I've seen a lot of pastors that have disqualified themselves, and the church has cast them out and cast them off, treated them terribly, almost like shooting your wounded, is what the phrase is. I don't agree with that. I've seen pastors fail, and the way the church treats the pastors when they fail not only hurts the pastor, but hurts the wife and hurts the children and hurts generations to come. So I think we've handled this wrong. But I have to say, here again is the balance.
Yeah.
The Bible is very clear that there are some pastors who are qualified and some who are unqualified. Right. And I don't think in the church culture that we live in America today that we discern that very well. 1 Timothy 3 is very clear on the qualifications of a pastor. And I believe at any point when a pastor steps outside of those qualifications, he disqualifies himself. He's no longer a qualified candidate to be the pastor. And that there's several things that could fall under the term above reproach. Right. That you're above someone pointing an accurate finger of accusation against you. And things like adultery are definite disqualifiers. In the most important relationship of your life, other than your relationship with Christ, you've found yourself to be untrustworthy. Yeah. How can I trust you anywhere else? So Steve Lawson told us one time in class, he was warning us against adultery as pastors, and he said, just imagine you commit adultery and you have failed your wife, you failed your kids, you failed your congregation, you've failed in the calling of your ministry. He said, you need to quit immediately, resign from your position, go get you a job at Walmart as a greeter, because you are no longer qualified to be in that position. And once you do that, there's no longer any bringing you back. You've lost that above reproach. Certain sins like that are just disqualifiers. Forgiven, yes. Restored to the fellowship of the brethren as a church, yes.
Right.
But back to that position, no. You've disqualified yourself. And we've taken that above reproach and totally blotted it out. Mm-hmm. Where there are men now who have disqualified themselves, and they're not above reproach. There's fingers of accusation that can be pointed at them. They're not trustworthy. And we've put them back and restored them to a position of leadership. And I think that's harmed the church and not helped it.
All right, what about this next question here? It says, as New Testament Christians, why do we still teach or preach from the Old Testament?
That's a good question, and I've got a good answer.
Okay.
My answer is because the Old Testament's awesome. I mean, that's I'll give you a biblical answer just because it's awesome. I mean, I love Genesis. I love the creation account. I love the stories. I love David and Goliath. I love Samson and Delilah. I love the Psalms. I'm preaching my 143rd Psalm tomorrow night. I love the Psalms. I love the wisdom of Ecclesiastes and Proverbs. I mean, these are, for us not to preach these things, we're missing 2/3 of the Bible.
Yeah.
God's revelation. I mean, so I love it, and I think that it's just as Christian a book as the New Testament is. But to give you a preacher answer, other than just I love it, it's God's word.
Right.
We know that 2 Timothy 3:16 says all Scripture is given by inspiration of God. It's profitable, and when he said that, he didn't mean the New Testament; he meant the Old Testament. So it is inspired, it is infallible, it is inerrant, it is sufficient, it is everything that the New Testament is. So we cannot take away 2/3 of the Bible. When Jesus preached the Bible, he preached the Old Testament. When Paul preached the Bible, he preached the Old Testament. That's what they were preaching. Jesus was an Old Testament preacher. Jesus knew the Old Testament. Jesus followed the Old Testament. So as Christians, as followers of Jesus, we have it too. And when Paul said preach the word, he meant preach the Old Testament. I mean, that's what he was saying. And it's for our instruction. I mean, I think Romans says that we would not know of sin if it wasn't for the law.
Right.
So we need it. It's a gospel issue that God, who God is, the law God gave. We've broken that law. Jesus came to fulfill that law. I think it's part of the gospel.
Right.
And again, I think it's loaded. I mean, it is loaded. I used to, when I first started preaching, I was so New Testament heavy. I mean, it was Romans. It was the letters. It was, the Gospels. And I love those things. But, I mean, we're missing some of the good stuff. Some of the great doctrine and theology is found in the Old Testament. I mean, where would we be without Psalm 23?
Yeah.
Where would we be without Isaiah 6 and Isaiah 53? And I can go on and on and on. Genesis 1, 2, 3, just keep going. The Exodus 3 and the burning bush. I mean, I think I'm going a little too far with this, but you can tell. I started preaching the Psalms. I've preached Ecclesiastes. I've preached Malachi. I've preached Ruth. Goodness, the greatest love letter or love story in the history of time is Ruth.
Sure.
I preach Judges, and my church loves it. I think here's the thing, and I'll stop. But I think there's a lot of bad Old Testament preaching out there, where they use stories and they use them as examples of be like Joseph or be like this,
right?
Be like David and kill Goliath with your 3 stones, whatever. I think when we teach it as it's meant to be taught, as God intended for it to be taught, there's so much value.
Yeah.
And it adds so much more to the New Testament when we preach and teach the Old Testament. So I think I said I was going to stop. I'm a preacher. I've been on the podcast a lot. You guys
He's earned the right. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. I told our church the other night, I said, I think our worship in churches today is so bad because we've not studied the Psalms and the songs that God's given us. I think our praying in a church is so weak because we've not studied the prayers of David in the Psalms. I think we are so foolish in the church today because we don't know the wisdom of Solomon. We're missing out on some of the great, great teachings because there's so many people that don't look to the Old Testament.
Right.
So I'll always be New Testament heavy, but I love the Old Testament.
It's the whole counsel of God.
Yeah.
I mean, again, when we're told to preach that, that's what's implied, you know. Both testaments clearly put together, all pointing to Christ, all pointing to the gospel. It's clear, it's concise. It doesn't trip one another up. You know, the Old Testament is not contradictory to the New. It's just simply complementary. So, yeah, I'm with you there 100%. Sixth question here. How do you deal with someone from the Jehovah's Witness when you talk to them personally?
I just recently talked to a Jehovah's Witness, shared the gospel with them in the weight room. Ran across a guy, very nice guy. And I've seen a lot of people that have dealt with Jehovah's Witnesses in a mean way.
Yeah.
Derogatory way, make fun of them because they do have a few, I don't know the word to use. I think I would use the word wonky. Maybe that's not a good word. It's kind of outlandish beliefs about the end times and how many people are going to be saved. And so people are mean to them.
Yeah.
And I don't think we need to do it that way. Like I talked to this guy at the gym, I think it needs to be done in love, just like we would with anybody else. They've believed a false gospel. They're deceived, and they need their eyes open to the truth. And just like I did with that guy, you can't get caught up in those little bitty arguments about all these little details that they'll take you to. And they will. I mean, I talked to that guy. He tried to take me to all kinds of different arguments and different directions. But I think just like with anybody else, when you're sharing the gospel, you need to direct their attention to Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
That's where they're wrong. And that's where they need to see the truth, is on Jesus. They don't believe the full deity of Jesus Christ. They don't believe that he's God. They actually will twist some of the scriptures. I was talking with a guy about John 1. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God.
Right.
And I told him, he said, that's not what it says. And I read it to him in the Greek, and I said, this is what the text says. I think the Greek is theos on logos. God was the Word. Yeah. And took him some other texts of Jesus saying he was God. You know, just the I am statements of John. So when you're talking to Jehovah's Witness, I think going to John, it is the gospel showing that Jesus is God. And that's what I did with that guy. I took him to Jesus, showed him that he's God, showed him proof and evidences that he was God, and told him at the end that he needed to put his faith in Christ. So I mean, I know that's not much different than how I would deal with almost anybody else.
Yeah.
But that's how I deal with Jehovah's Witnesses. I want to show them Christ and give them the gospel and pray that God is the one that opens their deceived eyes.
Right. All right, here's another good one. This one should may ruffle a few feathers. I don't know. We'll find out. Is baptizing infants or infant baptism, however you want to put that, is that biblical?
Do you have Presbyterian listeners?
I'm sure. Oh, yeah.
Okay. I mean, Catholics, Lutherans, all these people baptize infants. And I don't want to be mean about it for those listeners. I mean, they would probably send you a message and say, don't ever have Josh back on there again. This time was one too many. But when you say, is infant baptism biblical, my answer is, it's not biblical. You cannot find one single place in the entire Bible. You may be able to play devil's advocate and give me some things that maybe they could say, but there's not one time in the entire Bible where a baby is baptized. It's nowhere. You can't support it. The only baptism in the Bible is of believers. Babies can't believe. The only baptism, the word baptism. I mean, I think it's basic. The word baptism is immersion.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a picture of what happens to us when we're saved, that we're buried with Christ in baptism and we're raised to walk in newness of life. So you cannot picture. What would sprinkling picture? I mean, I think that's what the Lord's Supper is. It's a picture of what Christ has done for us, a symbol, and we remember. And it's a picture of the baptism of what happens to us in salvation, again, buried and risen like Christ. So I don't know what sprinkling would picture. It's nowhere, and I respect men like R.C. Sproul. We were talking about him earlier. I've listened to debates between Sproul and MacArthur, and those two were best friends, and they loved each other, and completely disagreed on baptism. I've listened to Kevin DeYoung talk about it. He's a Presbyterian, and he defends it as basically a baby dedication. I don't agree with him. I don't find it in the Bible, but I can still be a brother to him, So I don't see it in the Bible. I don't see it being a form of baby dedication. I don't see it as taking the place of circumcision, covenant, family. I just don't see that. And it's not, I mean, I think even Martin Luther, who baptized babies, was quoted as saying, it's not in the Bible. John Calvin baptized babies. He said it's not in the Bible. And these guys were sola scriptura.
Right.
So I think, and I'll say this and I'll be quiet, I think the reason that some of these guys didn't was because it was tradition, and the people that that refused to baptize babies, or the rebaptizers, the Anabaptists, were being killed for doing it.
Yeah.
So I think there was some fear there, and it's just carried on throughout since the Reformation, really. So it's just nowhere in the Bible. I mean, again, you might be able to play devil's advocate and give me some things that I can't explain, but
yeah, I'll kick back and I'm saying this because I've heard a lot of their arguments. I'm with you. I've listened to a lot of people. And just for the sake of learning here, just to throw these out, I would point out certain scriptures. And for the sake of the record here, let me just say I do agree with Josh on this topic. I don't think this is a salvation issue necessarily, but you would read passages like Lydia and her family were baptized. You would see things like the Philippian jailer, he and his household were baptized. I've seen a lot of people use that argument. I do think there's some holes in that. You're assuming that there were infants. You don't know that. You have no idea how old their children were. You have no idea if they even had children. So there's some holes in that argument. Again, we don't want to put anything into the text that's not there.
Yeah.
That's extra biblical, and that's not of God. I don't think that lends to any good biblical study. So, yeah, I'm with you on that. I think historically we've seen it. It's in sort of a practice that has been carried down. You named off a lot of the heavy hitters, and they did it. And like you said, they also admitted, I probably don't have chapter and verse for this, So, it is what it is. I'm not going to lose fellowship with somebody. You named off a lot of tremendous brothers that practice this. And we'd have fellowship with them all day long, over this. So, yeah, not saying that's not an important question. I'm not demeaning that by any means, and I know you're not either. So I do think that it would require some deeper study and looking at the text a little bit plainer, just to be a little bit more honest with it, I think. So,
yeah.
All right, last question here. This is a good one. I like this question, particularly as I'm an educator. I don't care to explain that to people and let you in on that. I teach high school for a living, so this question is sort of right up my alley. But listeners ask, what resources, and you and I kidded about this before we started, so I'm going to preface it and give you a really hard time. What resources other than the Bible would you recommend for middle or high school age Christians?
Okay. I mean, my answer was the Bible.
And that, by the way, is the right first answer. Let's just put that out there.
I'll say that I'm going to say the Bible to start, because I think that we've we almost think that middle school and high school kids can't learn the Bible.
Yeah.
And I think they can. I think that, and I've seen that with my own kids. I've got a 9th grade girl now. I think she can read the Bible. I think that's enough. I think it's sufficient. I think preaching the Bible is enough for, right now I have, I think the listeners know that I have 5 kids. I have a 10-month-old baby. I got a 6-year-old girl, a 10-year-old, 11-year-old boy, 13-year-old boy, and a 15-year-old girl. And all but the baby will sit in church and listen to me preach.
Yeah.
And I think that's primarily what they need. So I want to put that there. That's the first thing they need. They need to read the Bible on their own, and they need taught by their parents, and they need preaching from their pastor. Before the pandemic, we used to send our kids, and I'm not saying it's bad. Children's church is not bad, but we would send our kids to children's church. And the pandemic hit, and we quit having children's church. And my kids come up to listen to me preach, and it was I've seen a phenomenal growth in them just from sitting and listening to 3 sermons a week. So I have to say that. I'm a Bible man. Kids need the Bible.
Yeah.
And second, and you said it earlier too, they need a good Bible. I'm sitting here right now with my 13-year-old boy's John MacArthur study Bible.
Mm-hmm.
I just recently bought him this, and we're not on video, but it is thick with study notes and detail on each book, and he's reading through the Bible in a year right now, and as he has questions, it has notes. You cannot get a better study Bible, I think, than the John MacArthur study Bible. Yeah. So I've got, my 15-year-old has one, my 13-year-old has one. I think you need to get them a study Bible. Right. I tell our parents that at church, get your kids a good study Bible. And you can probably give them some more resources other than the John MacArthur study Bible. MacArthur's my guy, so I'm going to push that. And then other resources I can give you. I think they need some basics. Yeah. We talked about that earlier with the R.C. Sproul series on some of the fundamentals of the faith, the basics. John MacArthur has a book on the fundamentals of the faith that the kids need to learn. That would go along the line more of a theology, of a doctrine. I think they need to be grounded in the faith. They're getting ready to go into a world that's going to do everything they can to destroy their foundation. And if their foundation isn't strong, then they're going to be knocked down by university, by media, by social media. So right now is our time to build their foundation. And they need doctrine, they need theology, they need to know these things. So I would find good books, good resources like R.C. Sproul's Fundamentals or MacArthur's Fundamentals. And it's written in a way that they can understand. You may be able to give some more resources, but those are the types of things. Bible, study Bible, some kind of doctrinal, basic questions, kind of thing that they need to learn. So that's what and I'm just doing that from my experience with middle school kids, my own kids. So you might be able to throw some other things out there.
Yeah, I would agree 100%. That's a really bad misconception that like middle school and high school age kids need things that are, I'm going to use the word watered down, simplified. Yeah. I don't think that's true at all. I teach these guys for a living. I think they want to be challenged. I think they want to go into the deep end. If you sit on the ocean, like everybody's excited to get way out there. Nobody's excited to get shallow. I think the same thing's true with difficult questions. They've got them. They're seeing them. I could almost argue this group's growing up a whole lot faster than any generation that's ever been around. And that's not a good thing. And so I don't think we do any service by weakening down what we need to be teaching. And like you said, a study Bible is a great place to start. Put it in their hand, let them read. And I would also challenge parents and church leaders, be ready to answer. Don't give them fluff. I think one of the things that intimidates a lot of parents and a lot of church leaders is they themselves are not prepared to answer some of the questions. And that is more an indictment on your Christianity than it is the kids. They're doing the right thing. They're asking the questions that need to be asked. It's our duty as elder statesmen and leaders and parents to provide the correct answer. And there's no reason we shouldn't have good, solid answers. And that does not mean you're going to answer everything. I get that. There are some things that you know as well as I do. The secret things belong to the Lord. I know that, and there are times I'm just going to have to throw my hands up and say, I technically don't know that, okay? But it's also not an excuse for me to say that, well, I don't care. We should care, and we should put it in their hands. But I'm with you, a good study Bible. I've got MacArthur Study Bible myself. It's tremendous. I use it a lot when I prepare for sermons. There's a couple more. We live in a digital age, so I would throw a few of these out here. I've been very impressed with the Enduring Word commentary online. I think that would be a really good one for high school age kids if you're studying the Bible. I would dive in on that. You can find that again at Enduring Word. I think they do an excellent job. They borrow from some of the other great commentaries and commentators throughout history. You're going to see a lot of Spurgeon and people like that along the way in that commentary. I love how they implement usually 3 or 4 different guys throughout history to comment on the same passage. You might even see some Augustine in there. So they go way back. I really appreciate that in them. Is there, what about books? Let's go extra biblical for just a second. I mean, is there anybody or any particular book that comes to mind that you're like, hey, that would, if I was, 16, 17, 18, I kind of wished I'd have read that, looking back on it. Is there anything that comes to mind on your end about that?
I would. There's a book Steve Lawson wrote called The Cost. Mm-hmm. I think that's the name of it. Really simple to read.
Yeah.
I mean, just and it talks about really what it means to be a Christian. And I think Lawson writes in a way that Lawson writes a lot like Sproul, that anybody can understand. And I want to get that into the hands of my kids at a young age.
Right.
In this age we're living in where it's easy believism, and we need to show them that there's a cost to living for Christ.
Yeah.
And that's something that I didn't learn early enough. And I want my kids to learn at a young age. And that's one. MacArthur has several books that are great. I don't have a list here or can rattle them off real quick too.
Right.
And I could give you some other doctrinal, theological books, but I would start with something simple. Just Google R.C. Sproul's stuff and MacArthur and Steve Lawson and Kevin DeYoung has some good books.
Yeah.
I mean, he writes really well. So, not right off the top of my head can I name anything besides that Lawson book.
There's a book by MacArthur that comes to mind that I read years ago, and I remember thinking, I thought, wow, I wished I'd have read that years before. It was called Fool's Gold,
I've heard that.
And it was really solid, just kind of breaking down some really weak, argumentative things that have sort of crept their way into the Christian worldview. And it's a great one for kids that age before they start seeing some of these things coming down the pipe. He writes it really well. It's not a large book. You could read this in a pretty couple of easy settings. It's broken down by topic, so you can actually you really don't necessarily have to start with chapter 1, so to speak. I mean, you could really start thumbing through things that might be a little more personal for you. I would recommend that one for sure. Are there any digital media version things right now that come to mind? There's a few that sort of popped in my head that maybe on top of obviously studying the scriptures, reading good, solid books, but let's just be honest, we live in a good digital age. There are things out there that are quality. I don't want to run away from that. Obviously, we listen to good preaching. We're going to do that and turn people on. Anything come to mind there as far as audio or video worthy?
I don't do a whole lot of online stuff. I'm an in my hands kind of guy. Mm-hmm. But my kids have done Pilgrim's Progress. I don't know. I mean, we just got done watching the Pilgrim's Progress movie.
Right.
There's a real good one of those. It's well done. I mean, Charles Spurgeon read that book. I think somebody said over 100 times in his life. So that's a book that it'll grow with you as a kid, but as you grow up. Also, Spurgeon did a morning and evening devotion that you can get for free as an app.
Yeah.
And it gives you a devotion in the morning, devotion in the evening. my dad will probably listen to this, but he sends me a Charles Spurgeon quote from that devotional about every morning in a text message. And I know that's simple devotion. There's nothing wrong with good devotion.
Right.
I mean, quick read in the morning. I've got the actual book form of it, but it's a free app. So there's things out there that you could download. I mean, a lot of things. That's one of the good things about the age we're living in. We have access. It's good and bad. We have access to some very good things if we know where to look for them.
Right. Yeah, there's some really good ones creeping up. I mean, when I say these, I'm not telling you that everything in here is 110% awesome and it's just the greatest thing that's ever happened, but I'm very impressed with ministries like AGTV, that they've went out of their way to help fund this. And if you're not familiar with that, that's basically a streaming platform that you can get, if you got a Fire Stick, a Roku, something like that, any kind of smart TV, even on your phone. This organization's done a really good job. They have put out some really quality documentaries over the last 3 or 4 years, and they've got more coming out that I think middle school and high school age teens would really gravitate towards and learn a thing or two. There's some really solid people in those documentaries that do a good job of explaining some important topics: justification by faith, atonement, things that really need to be grounded into believers and understanding your salvation and where you stand with God, and then how God views you. I think those are really important for young believers. Those are out there.
Let me throw one more out. You just brought it, came to my mind. Answers in Genesis.
Yes, yeah.
There's that website. You could Google Answers in Genesis.
Right.
And there are so many biblical and scientific articles on creation. And they do a phenomenal job. I have so many college kids that have come to me, and I've sent them to that website, and they've said, thank you for giving us a biblical viewpoint of creation. I sent my kids there. I think we've done Vacation Bible School material from
Okay, right, yeah.
So I had to throw that out there.
Yeah, that's a good one. I'd forgotten about that, but I have visited that as well. That's a really good site. There's, obviously there's apps and podcasts and things like that. I mean, shoot us an email. We'd be glad to talk that out with you. I'm sure there's more come to our mind. I know we listen to them. I've talked about them before, but obviously Deeply Rooted. I mean, everybody wants to jump in on that. So, we want to shamelessly plug Deeply Rooted because, easily the best podcast out there for middle school and high school. So point all your teens to that, listeners. But no, in all seriousness, so there's plenty of them out there. You can email us. We're drigw18@gmail.com. Josh, you can get a hold of him there at West End Baptist Church. He'd be glad to talk to you. Plenty of resources out there for teens and high school age kids. But like we said, start with the scriptures. Obviously, that's the beginning. Get a good solid Bible in their hand that they could read, that's got quality commentary, and then work from there. Just work your way out from that direction. So the last thing you want to do is be apathetic about it. Yeah. That is the last starting point that you want to go from. Again, they are hungry for that. They are questioning things. They couldn't help but it. Like I said, this is a difficult generation to grow up in. And we are bombarded on every side with things. So, parents, church leaders, you got a tall task. Don't run away from it. I mean, there's real spiritual warfare going on out there. Sitting on the sideline is the last thing you want to be caught doing. So, man, I appreciate you coming on again. I had a good time. I think we got through those questions really well. I love the answers. I think people are going to benefit from this. So is there anything else you got to say before we close it out here?
As always, thank you for having me. I enjoy this. You sent me a text last week, said you want to come on. My response, even before I checked my calendar to see if I could do it, was yes. I mean, I'm always available to come on here and talk to you. I enjoy our time together. I really do. This is fun, even if it's not being recorded.
Right.
So thank you for having me, for trusting me to try to answer these questions. And I will say, I don't know all the answers. I don't claim to know all the answers. I just know where to find them.
Yeah.
And I know I have no problem saying I don't know the things. but I know that we can turn to the Scriptures and find the answers.
Right.
He's given us all things pertaining to life and godliness. So thanks again for having me.
Well, man, we appreciate you being on. Thanks for being available and trustworthy. You know, I'd hate to say this, but I mean, I don't just call on anybody to get on here. And I think that says a lot about your ministry and where you stand on the Scriptures. So, man, we appreciate you being here. Again, as always, I'm sure, you know, good Lord willing, we'll have you down the road again for something else. So we're just going to keep making a big star out of you, man. I don't know what else to say, but, you know, the world doesn't get enough of Josh Tompkins. So we're going to do what we can to get you out. But, hey, man, if you haven't, remember, listeners, go on over YouTube, Apple Podcasts, hit that subscribe button, be a part of what we're doing here. Find us on our Facebook group page. Look on over at our website, deeplyrootedpodcast.com, all kinds of things on there for you. So we're doing what we can here to minister as best we can with what we've got. We love doing it. I think God's being glorified in it. I think people are being helped. And as long as that's going on, we're going to keep plugging along. So, you know, we covet your prayers. And we're looking forward to a fun September. Got some things coming up, just to let the cat out of the bag a little bit here. Basically what we're going to be doing in September is what I'm just going to call September Stories. And we're going to be interviewing people with their testimony and getting some really solid background on how people came to faith. We're going to be looking at people from different angles, coming from different walks of life, but same Savior, same gospel, same salvation. So I'm really excited about that. I think that'll be really good. I think you're going to want to really tune in for those. So be on the lookout for those upcoming episodes. But for the time being, hey, share this one. This is a good one to help out people. So pass this along as much as you can. And until next time, we hope you guys have a great week in Jesus.
Deeply rooted in God.